well known that slacking demand is a key reason for the economic slowdown, and this was underlined once more in the consumer confidence survey conducted by the Reserve Bank of India. So according to the survey, consumer confidence in the month of November hit an all-time low since 2014, with 100 being the dividing line between pessimism and optimism. The current situation index in November fell to 85.7 from 89.4 in September. The one-year forward perceptions also took a dive. In the survey that spanned 13 cities and over 5,000 households, consumers are saying that price increases in the past year and will continue to increase in the year going forward. Now remember, this survey essentially talks about consumer confidence. That means how people are feeling about their current and future economic situation. How confident are they that they will spend? And we know that if there's less confidence, that means there's a problem. So today, let's look at solutions. Let's look at what can really be done to boost consumer confidence, because beyond a point, that's one part of the problem that has not been looked at closely enough, perhaps. And speaking to me now on this are N.R. Bhanumurthy, professor at NIPFP, and Sunil Alag, commentator and founder of SK Advisors, someone who's also had vast experience with consumer-facing business for several years. So welcome to both of you. Professor Bhanumurthy, let me begin by getting your view on the consumer confidence survey and why it's an important part of the puzzle as we're trying to understand what's happening in the economy right now.
Well, I don't think it is a puzzle. Now, if you look at the graph that is shown in the survey, there is a steep decline in the overall index from March 2019. So that itself shows that the slowdown has been there for quite some time, and that is actually showing up in overall GDP numbers. But unfortunately, if you look at for the 12-month ahead expectations, many indicators are actually showing kind of a deteriorating kind of a strength. But if you look at the spending, which actually that is one of the crucial number from the survey, the survey shows that 12 months down the line, we should expect some kind of recovery in the overall consumer spending. I think apart from that, all whole indicator shows that the bad days are there for next few quarters. I think the spending seems to be picking up in the medium term, but I think employment, prices, incomes, everything is expected to be deteriorating.
Sunil, let me get your take on this. Now, you've headed a very consumer-facing business, and I'm sure have seen several cycles. What's your sense about what's going on right now, where consumer confidence seems to have taken a hit?
Look, no matter what anyone might say, I've been saying it from July, all the efforts of the government has been on the supply side. They've reduced corporate taxes, they've gone ahead and helped people who are running like the auto industry or the real estate industry. They're given money. They haven't bothered about the demand side at all. And demand for me is the oil in the engine which is required, because that starts the virtuous cycle. Once demand goes up, industry will produce more, employment will go up, the virtuous cycle will start. They have done nothing on the demand side as yet, and that's what worries me, because the balance between the two is important. And if you don't do it on the demand side, consumer demand, the perception at the moment is that, look, nobody's done anything for us, why should we spend? And if they don't spend, nothing in the economy is going to move. I mean, when I say use the word nothing, it might sound strong, but what I mean is that all the steps are for mid-term and long-term. When you help industry, the results don't come immediately. But when you help the consumer, the results come immediately, absolutely, as if the tap has been put on. And hopefully in the next 1 to 2 months, they're going to put money into the hands of the consumer, which is the most important.
Mr. Professor Bhanumurthy, you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, I think there's little disagreement on that. Now, if you look at the Q2 GDP numbers, I think the number of 4.5 is actually majorly contributed by the government expenditure. So, in my view, the government has actually started increasing their expenditures Now, I think that should create demand, and I think that's one of the reasons I have been arguing that the GDP numbers are actually bottomed out, and one should actually see recovery from the third quarter onwards. And in fact, there is another number which shows that the fiscal deficit has actually crossed more than 100% of the total target. So, that itself shows that government seems to have already front loaded many of the expenditures. Now, if you think that expenditures on the banking sector is not demand creation, I think that's a different story. But whatever the expenditure the government does actually should lead to increase in the demand, and that's one of the reasons why I particularly feel that there should be some recovery from the next quarter. And I think that is what the consumer expectation survey is also showing, that I think the expectations on the spending is expected to go up. So, I think that seems to be largely driven by government expenditure. Now, if you look at, I think in the current parliament session, there is already a supplementary demand which is already been cleared by the parliament, and I think we should expect a third supplementary demand for grants also coming up. So, if that things happen, I think the flow of money towards the rural segments as well as for the people should actually increase. In fact, even the tax cut should also work as a demand.
Which you're referring to which tax cut, Professor Bhanumurthy? You're referring to the corporate tax cut?
So, I think corporate
what tax cuts?
Yes.
Tax cuts are only for the corporate
demand.
sector.
In fact,
corporate, but that doesn't generate demand, sir.
Okay.
No. It's in the medium term and long term when demand will be created, sir.
Okay, one by one,
nothing is going to happen unless the consumer starts.
No, sir. I just wanted to.
Professor Bhanumurthy. Yes.
No, I would like to. I'd like to supplement my point here, that if you look at the multipliers, any reduction in the taxes, whether it is a direct corporate taxes or the personal tax, should have a multiplier impact on the demand side. I think my study has already clearly showed that corporate tax has a multiplier of minus 1.02 on the overall demand. So, I think to say that the corporate taxes should not create demand, I think that is empirically, that needs to be looked at empirically in my view.
Sunil Alag, you want to respond to that? So, no, I think we're also talking about consumer confidence. So, let's look at look at that context as well. But Sunil, I'll let you come in there on that specific point.
But no. Let me first respond. Me first respond to what he said. I'm saying that everything done for the corporate world does not result in immediate. It's meant for medium and long term impact on demand. If the government wants to start anything immediate, they have to put money into the hands of the consumers. So, just going in for corporate tax, most of the corporates are improving their profits or paying off their debts. So, if you say 60 or 70% goes back to paying debts, or if anything is given to anyone and they go and use it for paying off debt, it doesn't increase demand, sir. All I'm saying is there is a balance which is required on the demand side as well as on the supply side. The whole government effort has swayed onto one side. We got to bring the pendulum back for some immediate impact. And the question of the government spending always increases when you have a slowdown in the economy. Obama did it in 2007 in America. That is expected. So what if it happens in 1 year? You don't worry about your fiscal deficit in year 1 because that can be corrected in year 2, sir. Nothing has happened when you go out on the road. Why aren't consumers spending?
I'll tell you what the deal with the fiscal deficit is. People don't believe the number. We are saying we want to stick to 3.3. Experts believe it could be high as 10. So if you're going to start stretching and being elastic about that number, where are you really going to stop? No one. I'm just being very honest here. No one believes that number.
No, look. No, but whether you believe the number or not, fiscal deficit is not a permanent thing. This year is an unusual year. Even if you go up to 4%, whether you believe it or not, let's assume they're trying to keep it at 3.3. Forget about 3.3. Even if Keynes has said all along 6% inflation in a developing economy or 4% fiscal deficit will not make any difference. We don't want runaway inflation going into double digits and all. But if you have this phobia of saying I'm going to maintain fiscal deficit when you've got the economy going down, then look, even RBI has said 5% is maximum. So even if we go up from 4.5 to 4.8 or 5, that doesn't make any impact on consumer demand. We need
I
to
think
go
this-
up to
no,
6
no,
and 7%.
wait, let's come
And
to the
that
point.
requires
One
some
minute,
immediate and drastic action.
No, so what is this action? Let's come to the point. I think there is no real disagreement or argument between both of you on the fact that consumer confidence needs to be enhanced. People need to feel like they want to spend money. Professor Bhanumanti, now that's the problem. There is liquidity sloshing in the system. NBFCs, the good ones, are now getting some financing. Banks want to give loans. No one wants to take them. No one wants to take them. No one wants to pay those EMIs. So it does come down to sentiment to some extent. Now, talking up the economy is not helping at this point. We know now, that tool is now pointless. So then now what do we do? We're talking about GST cuts. People are saying we're talking about GST hikes possibly because of revenue deficits.
No, I don't think this is the right time to really look at revenue mobilization mechanism. I think right now what is important is to see that we revive the overall demand, and I think there is no other option other than loosening the fiscal deficit. And I think this is exactly what the government is trying to do. And as I said, now there is going to be some increase in the demand for grants, supplementary demand for grants, especially for the Rural Development Ministry. And I think there is a lot of focus on increasing the expenditures on the rural segment. So I think the government seems to be knowing that the only way left right now is to increase government consumption expenditure in some areas, and also to some extent capital expenditure. And the rural sector, I think you can go for both consumption expenditure as well as capital expenditure. And I think, as Mr. Alag pointed out, this is not the time to really think about FRBM. So I think we should really forget about FRBM for the current year. And so even if there is a slippage in the fiscal deficit, if we can revive the sentiments, revive the demand conditions, I think that is the best way to go.
Otherwise, what we are reviving sentiments? How are we going about reviving sentiments?
No, I think the measure that has been taken by the finance ministry since July. Now, if in fact if that is actually worked out, for example, the finance minister actually came up and said that we are going to do the quick recapitalization of banks. I think they have done it. Again, there are something that they have demanded from the supplementary budget to recapitalize some of the existing banks like IDBI and all those things. So there is no option other than going for front loading of all the expenditures, and I think rescuing some of the banks is the only way left right now in the short term. Of course, in the medium term to long term, there can be many things that can be done. I think the government has already done some of the things. Maybe some of them are in the pipeline. That's what the finance ministry keeps saying. So, I mean, in my view, in fact, this is what I said, I'm little more optimistic in the recovery now than when it was in July or August.
That's a good point. Are we looking better than July and August? So remember, the realization that there is a big problem started dawning on people more effectively in July, August. But Sunil Alag, your sort of prescription of how to boost consumer confidence, and you must have seen these cycles in the past, especially with fast moving goods. How do you get people to want to use discretionary spending once more?
See, one of the two ways is the perception, as you rightly pointed out, has to change. How does the perception change? There is a corporate tax rate which has been dropped to 25 and 17%. You've got the highest consumer tax rate of 42.5%. There's a huge gap. The perception will change when you reduce the taxes for the consumer. Then the consumer begins to feel. Right now, everything is going to the corporate sector, which is a good idea. You need it on that end for medium and long term. The immediate steps are not being taken. You have to change the perception in the market by giving money in the hands of the consumer. They haven't got it as yet. Probably the government is going to do it. GST, the figure has to be all towards demand generation. How do you take GST and make it into a demand generated things? Like for instance in hotels, when people go out and travel, when people buy food outside. There is no rate change in GST. So at this point of time, there is nothing that the government can do which is written in stone. They can always go back to the higher rates 1 to 2 years later. But right now, the perception has to change. How are you going to change it? I'm telling you, once you put money into the hands of the lower middle and the middle income group, the perception will be, I have the money. Reduce the taxes or reduce the rates or reduce the cost of living. Something has to be done in a dramatic fashion for an immediate impact. What the government has done is right, for medium and long term is right. Look, when the banks reduce the rate of interest, only the people who have to pay back banks feel, okay, I have to pay, my EMI has gone down. But are people borrowing? When you construct houses, are people buying the new house? That's the most important thing in my life. So there's no point in going ahead and giving money to the real estate when nobody wants to buy a house. Right. They're all waiting to see what happens.
All right.
And for me, perception is more important than reality right now. That's what we do in the FMCG business.
Well, yeah, you have to give people the feeling that it is a good time to spend. And that is something possibly that the government will work on, but it's a tricky situation. It's a tricky situation.
And the last thing is, where will the money come from? They should sell all the companies they plan to sell. They'll get much more money in their hands if they speed up that process.
But they have to sell it by March.
All the companies that they should not be in.
Yeah, they are planning to sell it by March, April. You need buyers and you need them in good time. So it's really, we've spoken about this before.
But there's planning. So somebody, I just want to answer, where will the money come from
for
there?
The finance minister today, and the new consumer confidence numbers show how sharply it's dropped, the worst since 2014. Definitely alarm bells need to start ringing. People have to feel like they can spend money. I want to thank both of you for joining us today and talking about a lack of confidence. Well, that brings us to the newsmaker of the day. We know the telecom industry has been going through a really bad time. And how bad can it be? Well, imagine this. Kumar Mangalam Birla, the chairman of Vodafone Idea, actually has said in a conversation that we will shut shop if we don't get relief from AGR dues. He was speaking at an event and comes in the context of, the telecom sector in a bad shape after a Supreme Court judgment recently ruled in favor of the government on the definition of AGR, which effectively means huge penalties for major companies. The worst hit, of course, Bharti Airtel and Vodafone Idea specifically. In fact, Vodafone recently talked about how for them the entire India operation is pretty much loss-making. They've written it off. So it remains to be seen whether Idea, that is the Birla part of the business, would like to put in money. He's made it clear that there's no sense putting in good money after bad. That's really the newsmaker of the day and the statement that has shaken and stirred corporate India. It's also being seen as an SOS call and quite a nudge to the government, because now the ball is in the government's court, seeing how they will actually respond to the review pleas that telecom companies have filed. If there is no positive sentiment, then Kumar Mangalam Birla is saying very clearly, leaving nothing to doubt, that he will shut shop and Vodafone Idea as a service will cease to exist. So that's the big story. But before we go this evening on the India Development Debate, some of you may remember that yesterday we took over we paid attention to the issue of climate change and how it impacts all of us. Very important report which was presented at the United Nations talked about the highest number of deaths due to climate change taking place in India, over 2,000, nearly 2,081. Well, today our Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar spoke about the impact of pollution on deaths. Here's what he said.
Let us not create a fear psychosis among people, because pollution problem is all over the globe. In Los Angeles to European cities to everywhere, there is pollution of different factors. But there is no direct correlation as far as studies we have conducted. I am telling you, the Indian studies conducted have not shown a direct correlation of shortening of life because of pollution.
Well, that was India's Environment Minister saying that there is no real connection. Let's not create fear psychosis. Just to tell you, a Lancet study in 2017 says that India tops in pollution-related deaths. According to the report, 2.5 million of the total 9 million pollution-related deaths were reported in 2015 from India. So it's about time that we start accepting what is happening. You can only find solutions if you identify those problems, and here's hoping for more solutions and less denial. That's all the time we have this evening on the India Development Debate. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here on Monday.